Hello again. My name's David Howard. I am an alcoholic. You know, as Janet said, there's a lot of people that do a lot of work to put on this conference every year. The only thing I need to do is show up and call the meeting to order and to adjourn it. I do get one privilege, and that is to select the speakers. My speaker tonight, when I heard his tape, I thought, oh, he's probably booked. He's probably booked. It's just my luck. I gave him a call, but in his tape he says that if the night is free, call him and he'll be here. So I called him. He asked me the date. He says, I'm free. And I said, well, I'd like to invite you. And he says, I'll be there. And at dinner tonight I found out that, he's a human being like the rest of us. This guy makes coffee every Wednesday night for 1,100 people at the Pacific Group in Long Beach, California. So I'd like to introduce to you Johnnie H. from Long Beach, California.
Hi, everybody. My name's Johnnie, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I'm glad to be sober. I didn't have any credentials tell David, I don't have any initials or credentials, so I'm just a coffee maker. That's my big claim to fame. Well, you can get along without DCMs and trustees and secretaries and chairmen and speakers. You can get along without all them, but you show up at a meeting without coffee and see how get along you get, for Christ's sake. I'd just like to know if there's anybody we didn't introduce. I want to thank David for the privilege of participating in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It's my opinion, and I hope it always remains such, that it's some type of a privilege to be allowed to come and sit with you good people. I hope I don't ever get it through my sick head that I have a right to everything that goes on to Alcoholics Anonymous just because I was lucky enough to stumble into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and get sober and stay that way. Hope that anything I'm ever asked to do in AA would be some type of a privilege, some type of an unearned privilege that I really don't have any rights to have. But I'm very grateful that people in Alcoholics Anonymous have given it to me. God, I'm glad to be here. I'm extremely pleased to be here tonight, fully clothed and in my right mind. I don't say that for any other reason other than the fact that the longer I stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more necessary it becomes for me to remember from whence I came. And I never want to forget that a little over 40 years ago right now, I came to crawling around in a cell in solitary confinement at a maximum security penitentiary, drifting in and out of total insanity. Now, because of a loving God that expressed himself through our program called Alcoholics Anonymous, it's no longer necessary for me to crawl around on my hands and knees like an animal. If I don't get nothing else out of this deal at all, guess I can live with that all the way home. Makes me feel good. Now, I'd like to be able to stand here tonight and tell you, man, that's where alcohol took me to. That's where I took me to. The only thing that alcohol ever did in my life, it kept me alive long enough to stumble into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm as sure as I'm standing here, if I hadn't taken a drink of alcohol, I'd have probably blown my brains out before I was 9 years old. I've always been a misfit. I don't know how long or how far back that reaches, but as far as I can possibly ever remember in my life, I've been restless and irritable and discontent. It just seemed out of sorts most of the time. I didn't know then, as I've come to understand today, that those are the symptoms of the most deadly disease that's ever been known to mankind. That's what I have. My disease has written history attached to it that stretches back almost 7,000 years. I didn't know that. I don't know what's wrong with me. I know a lot about whiskey. Everybody in my family drinks whiskey. They were Irish people, They didn't have any type of religion to hold their guilt down. They just drank. Them people were crazy people. I mean, they drank whiskey and went to penitentiaries. They drank whiskey and worked in them houses on the other side of the tracks. My mother got drunk and beat up my dad. My dad got drunk and beat up my mother. They both got drunk and beat me up. I saw what whiskey did to people. And I said way back there somewhere, I don't know where it was, I ain't going to drink. I'm not going to be like these people. I'm going to be better than they are. I'm going to step out of their world, have something, do something, and be something. But I don't know what's wrong with me. I got this thing missing inside me. See, I don't really know whether I was born alcoholic or not. It's totally immaterial to me how I got it. It seems like to me that all my life I've been needing an answer. Now, the problem with that is I didn't know what the problem was. It's kind of hard to seek an answer to a problem if you don't know what the problem is. I don't know. I got all these things that's going on inside of me, and I'm looking for a way out of this dilemma that I'm in, and I know I'm in a dilemma because my older brother's not like me. He just sits around and seems happy all the time. You know, I don't know what's going on, and I just don't know. I don't like all these people that I'm around. I can't stand them. I'm ashamed of them. I got all these things going on in my life. And I looked up one day and I saw my grandmother. Now, my grandmother lived till she was 90 years old, and she never took a drink of alcohol or smoked a cigarette in her life. Now, my grandmother wouldn't think it's a big deal. I've been sober almost 39 years. Big deal, she'd say. I ain't had a drink for 90. But I'd look at her and say, yeah, Granny, but you should have had a couple. Might have made you feel good. And my grandmother lived in this house. Everybody in her family were crazy. I mean, they were bootleggers and whores and gamblers. They were crazy people. Nuts. I mean, they're crazy people. Drank that whiskey and woo. Saturday night was kickoff night. I mean, they kicked off everybody. I mean, whoever survived was the king for the week. I guess that's the way they worked it. But my grandma used to get up on Sunday morning. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother when I was little because everybody else was busy. She'd get up, put the best thing she had on, and she took off and she was gone for a couple hours. And when she came back, something had happened to her. I could see it as clear as I could see you. She was a little lighter in her step and a little easier in her being. And she kind of danced over these crazy people and cleaned them up and cooked for them and sang songs to Jesus. I took a look at that and filed that in my keen alcoholic mind. Now, for you who are new here tonight, this is the only place in the world you're ever going to hear about the keen alcoholic mind. I bet you never go to an Al-Anon meeting and hear about the keen alcoholic mind. And I made another mistake in my life because they don't know no better. Now, you cannot punish somebody if they don't know any better. See, I thought that all I would have to do is go where my grandmother goes and do what my grandmother does. I'd be like my grandmother. I damn near died learning that I'm not like my grandmother. My grandmother's not alcoholic. I didn't know that. I didn't know then, as I've come to understand around here, that I am bodily and mentally different from my fellows. I didn't know that. So I did what I was supposed to do. I got up on Sunday morning, put my hand on my grandmother's hand, and went over and sat in my grandmother's church with my grandmother and waited for it to happen. And it didn't. Now, I don't remember filing that away and said that was an issue I was going to have to deal with later on. I remember that. I don't remember anything about it at all. I just sit there and watch them flop around and do all the things they do in there. I just looked at them and got up and left. You know, it took me a long time in Alcoholics Anonymous to discover something. That there wasn't anything wrong with my grandmother's church at all. But there was something wrong with the jackass sitting in there. Me. What I was doing in that church is what I did all my life prior to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous and for a long time after I was here. I'm looking for something out there to make me feel better in here. And that only proves to me one thing, that there was something wrong with me all the time right here. Some type of a restlessness inside of me. A couple of weeks later, sitting on the back porch of my grandpa's house, watching my grandpa drink whiskey out of a fruit jar, he set it down and I picked it up and took a drink of it. That's all I did. Something I said I'd never do, I did it. The next couple of minutes of my life is what makes me an alcoholic. Oh, I'm not an alcoholic because I spent the next 20 years of my life creating mayhem out there in the world. I'm an alcoholic because I have some type of an abnormal reaction to alcohol. What I damn near died learning was that everybody drinks it doesn't get the same reaction from it that I do. I didn't understand that because alcohol was a fantastic thing in my life. It went down inside of me, kind of stilled the screaming madness. It took me from the black pit of nothingness, stood me into the gray fringes of the business of living, and installed in me some type of arrogance that said, damn you world, it's all right. I'm not good enough to be around the good people, but I'm too good to be around the bad people. It's okay right here. That's what alcohol did for me. Now, that's not the thing that drove me into the gates of insanity and death and beyond. What got me was the thing that kicked in right behind that drink that is limited to alcoholics of my type, my book talks about. It says that once I ingest alcohol into my system, once I put it in there, not before, but once I put it in there, then I'm drinking to overcome a craving that's beyond all human help and beyond all human understanding. I didn't know that. Because every time I drank, for the next 20 years of my life, the same thing happened to me. I took a drink of alcohol. 3 days later, they pulled me out from underneath a bridge and stood me in front of a judge and sent me to the Hutchinson State Reform School. 20 years later, I took a drink of alcohol. They pulled me out of a car in Compton and stood me in front of a judge and sent me to 20 years in the penitentiary. Now, that's what happened to me. When I drank, I got drunk and went places. Man, I traveled around. I went from reform school to junior penitentiaries to nut houses. Now they call them treatment centers. Me, I like nut house better. I mean, it's a little more macho. Come on. I mean, if you're going to be bad, you ought to be bad. Don't quit drinking because you puke a little. Hang in there. Give it everything you got. Alcoholics Anonymous work a hell of a lot better when you run out of options. I gave it everything I had. I threw everything into the battle and lost the battle and didn't know what I was fighting. Because you know, about one time in my life did I ever come out of one of them institutions and say to myself, it's been quite a while since I've had a series of those electroshock treatments. I think I'll have a drink. Nope. I haven't been shot or stabbed for a long period of time. Think I'll have a drink? Nope. I drank after being sober for a period of time for the reason alcoholics of my type drink. Not to get drunk and to wet my pants or to throw up. I drink only to go, that's all. You see, I'm alcoholic. And if I don't find some way to live, for I don't have that comfort and ease, I'm going to drink. I don't have any more choice about that than I do about flying around this room because I'm alcoholic. Because I know right back here in the back of this sick little mind of mine what makes the big hurt go away. I've always known it. I know it right now. And if you put me in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong set of circumstances, I'll be drunk. I'm alcoholic. I don't have any choice about that. No matter how long I've been sober, no matter how many steps I've worked, no matter how many prayers I've said, no matter how many people I've sponsored, no matter how many meetings I've gone to, you put me in the wrong place, in the wrong time, in the wrong set of circumstances, and I'll drink. I'm alcoholic. And if you're alcoholic, so will you. There ain't no guarantee for this thing. If it was, our book would say that. But our book says we've got a daily reprieve. That means right now. And that's contingent upon my maintenance of certain spiritual conditions. It has nothing to do with being good. It has nothing to do with being anything at all. It just means that I have to have some type of a spiritual malady in my life, or I'm going to drink. And I don't know about anybody else, but I never knew that. because I'm sitting on a furlough from a reform school. I'm 10 or 11 years old drinking a bottle of Marcapetria red wine, which was my drink. Most of you have never heard of Marcapetria red wine. I know, but I'll tell you why, because it was experimental stages of Thunderbird. That's why you never heard of it. I'll tell you how bad it was. It never saw a grape. It'd get you. Now, I'm drinking this stuff, and I'm drinking this, and maybe I'm in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know. It was before it was popular. Some guy who probably later went on to school and became a therapist or something said to me, "Why don't you try these?" He gave me some pills. I don't remember saying to him, "What are those? Will they bother me if I take them?" I just took them. Thank God they weren't X-Lax. That's all I can tell you. Hell, we could have a whole new 12-step program hanging around here, I guess, called Laxatives Anonymous. I could be standing here tonight as the adult child of a laxative taker. I would have been functional, but Mother sat on the toilet all the time when I was small. Well, I hear stuff stupider than that in some of these things that masquerade as AA meetings. Worked. Thank God it worked. A couple of years later, same street corner. Hanging out with my little gang. I'm eating these pellets and I'm drinking this wine. And I don't know. The guy just stuck a needle in my arm. And for the next 14 years of my life, I stuck needles in my arm and I ran out of institutions. That's what I do. See, I live out there in the streets. And I do what people like me who live in the streets do. I destroy everything that comes in contact with me. I'm like a plague. And there's a reason for that. Would you tell the people out there we'll start the dance as soon as the meeting's over with? I have to get upset. Sometimes I feel like at these things I'm just a fill-in between the dinner and the dance, for Christ's sake. No, I don't judge. You see, I'm a taker. I'm a taker of things, and I'm a user of people, so therefore I'm a loser. I'm selfish, I'm self-centered, and I'm self-serving, and I got an ego bigger than this whole room. My entire lifetime was spent before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, for a long time after I was here, and maybe even a great deal of the time today, without a conscious thought or a conscious concern for any other human being who lived upon the face of this earth. I wasn't interested in you at all, unless you had something I wanted. Then when I got whatever it was that you had that I wanted, I cast you aside like so much trash and I went on about my business. That's the way I lived my life. Now, I didn't live my life like that one day or 1 week or 1 month until the heat got on. I lived my life like that from my earliest recollection of life until a long time after I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, what happened to me when I came to in that cell in solitary confinement in that penitentiary almost 40 years ago is very simply this. There wasn't a single solitary soul left upon the face of this earth that would send me a penny postcard. They were all gone. But they should be gone. And I didn't have any right to have any of them back. I still don't have any right to have anything good and decent in my life just because I was lucky enough to stumble into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and get sober and stay that way. You see, I can't take any credit for coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. So how in the hell can I take any credit for anything that's happened to me since I've been here? If I'd have known where I was coming that day, I wouldn't have come. The reason I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is that they allowed women to come into that institution that I was in. That's why I came. I came here almost 39 years ago to smell perfume. And I've been honking and sniffing around her ever since. I don't care why you're here. You know, I've given that a lot of thought here recently. But that's not the reason I'm here. You see, my last time out, I arrived at the Los Angeles County Jail dead on arrival. I was 128 pounds and I was yellow. I had 2 years doing to me exactly what I wanted to do to me anytime I wanted to do to me with any kind of quantities I wanted. That's it. And they somehow or other, by some strange hook or crook, I ended up strapped down on a bed in the old Los Angeles County Jail prison ward, with a doctor sitting down at the foot of my bed telling me I was going to die. His words were this: "Son, you're going to die and nothing we can do for you." I said, "Okay." Now all day passed and all night passed. That doctor come wandering back in my room the next morning, looked at that chart, looked at me and said, "Son, you're going to die and nothing we can do for you." Now I don't know how long this little dance of death went on, but somewhere during that period of time, there was a terror grip me that I've never known before or since. The idea came to me that I was going to live and not die. I was going to get up out of that bed, go to the penitentiary, come back out and start that rat race all over again, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I didn't know what to do. So I laid there for a period of time, and one night, because I never knew nothing better to do, I screamed out the only prayer I'd ever said in my life. I said, "Oh, God, help me. Oh, God, help me." Just that simple little prayer. Now, you know, my grandmother, who loved me more than she loved life herself, prayed for me every day of her life. I'm sure of that. I know my dear little mother prayed for me. I know that most of the people in my family, good, decent people that they were, prayed for me every day of their life. But you want to know something that's amazing to me? Until I asked God for help, I couldn't get it. Until I asked God for help, I could not get it. It's an amazing thing to me. I'm not saying prayers aren't good. I'm not saying they didn't do good things. I'm not saying that. But it wasn't for me until I asked God for help on my deathbed that I was given any help at all, because from that prayer to this moment, I can see the path as clearly as I can see you. Now, that night, there wasn't any blinding flashes of light. Nobody come running down the hall with a dozen donuts saying, "We got an A meeting down there." You know, I didn't get up and wander off into the tulip somewhere. I just went to sleep for a little while. And I got better and better and better. I don't know how many ever kicked a 2-year heroin habit, but that's what I was doing. That's the first time I'd been asleep in a long time. 2 weeks later, I'm up running around in jail looking for some more of the poison, putting me back in the bed I'd just gotten off of. And there's a reason for that. I told it to you. Back here is the knowledge that when I can't stand life on life terms any longer, I know what makes the big hurt go away. Although it wasn't working at that time, I didn't think. I knew it would if I could just find the right combination of things. So I got loaded again. Many years later, I used to run around with an old man who was the only father I've ever known. He used to talk a great deal about surrender. "Surrender," he'd say. God, the room would just roll. So I said to him one time, I said, "I want to ask you a question, Papa." And he said, "What do you want to know?" I said, "Didn't I surrender on my deathbed in the old Los Angeles County Jail with the same depth that you did in your kitchen floor in Beverly Hills?" He said, "Why, surely, son, without a doubt. Why?" Then I said, "Then how come I got loaded 2 weeks later and you never did?" He said, "That's very simple, son. You've got to surrender every day." What a novel concept. I never read that. See, but that's what stumbled into your meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that day. That's why I came in and sat down. I remember moving in, sitting down in the back row, had my coat collar up and my shades on because I was cool. If I'd have been any cooler when I got here, I'd have probably froze to death, for God's sake. Remember looking up on the backboard, saw two big gates, thought it was some type of an anti-aircraft gate or something. I didn't know what it was. Said to this guy, said next, "What's this?" He says, "Alcoholics Anonymous," loudly. I sunk down in my seat. Anybody see the big gangster hanging out with them winos? Been Gangsters Anonymous or Over Hip Anonymous or Dope Fiends Anonymous. Dope Fiends, God. Makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Makes the addict seem kind of candy-ass, don't it? Remember what I told you. If you're going to be bad for Christ's sake. I don't know what I am. I haven't got a clue what's wrong with me. So I said, well, I'll wait for these women to tell their racy stories. Now, you got to remember that when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, there weren't very many young, pretty girls hanging around here. If they were, they weren't sitting up that penitentiary where I was at, I'll tell you that. These old gals got to talk. One of them said she'd drank for a long time. You could look at her and know she'd been somewhere for a long time. She said, "I used to drink." I said, "I'll bet you did." Bad stuff, too. See, I knew everything when I got here. I'm a walking encyclopedia of useless information. I know so damn much about what ain't true, I don't know what is true. So there I sit, for all intents and purposes, a dead man. And you know what's very frightening to me today sometimes? I think about that. Here I am, 4th day of November, 1959. I'm sitting in a room staring at the answer that I had sold my soul for. But I didn't recognize the answer because I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't have a clue what was wrong with me. But I'm attracted to these people. I don't understand why. I understand today alcoholics are attracted to alcoholics for some strange reason. I didn't understand what they did. You know what these people did? They got up on Sunday morning. On Sunday morning they got up. They left their families, their houses, their TVs, their football games. They got in their cars, bought their own gasoline, drove 185 miles up those old back roads, spent 2 hours talking to a room full of people who didn't want to listen to them. People like me who sit in the back row and made fun of them. And I'll tell you how sick that is. Here I am sitting in the penitentiary. I don't know when I'm going home, and I'm making fun of people who are leaving in an hour. But I'm hip, baby. Yeah, I'm so hip the balls of my feet tickle me when I walk. I asked one of them people one day, I said, what do you get out of coming up here anyhow? He looked at me. I said, you some type of a sicko? You like to look at the animals in the cages? What's your deal anyhow? You know how you are. When you're hip, you got all them kind of statements. He said, well, son, when you can answer that question, you won't have to ask it. I thought about that. Deep thinking. I thought many hours I spent on a psychiatrist's couch trying to figure that statement out. And the reason I couldn't figure that out is the reason a lot of people have trouble with Alcoholics Anonymous. Just too damn simple. When I can figure why people make coffee at meetings and set up chairs and become DCMs and all these other things they got, then I don't have to ask questions like that because I'll be doing it. I'm going to share an experience with you. Now, this is not an opinion. This is a fact. Based on my experience of sitting in an average of 4 or 5 meetings a week for almost 39 years, with my eyes open, watching what goes on around me. My old sponsor, Norm Alpy, when he was alive, used to talk a great deal about crossing over some invisible line from controlled to uncontrolled drinking. I don't have any qualms about that whatsoever. But I'm here to tell you there's an invisible line in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're an alcoholic of my type and you don't cross over it, you're going to die drunk. Or you'll blow your brains out. Or you'll go insane. And that's the line where you got to cross over from being a taker to being a giver. And if you don't pass over that line and you're an alcoholic of my type, you're going to die drunk. I don't care what your therapist tells you. I don't care what your sponsor tells you. And the reason I know that is because it's our book. You know, that little blue book, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the same one in Connecticut, I think we got in California. It says in there that selfishness and self-centeredness seems to be the root of all of our problems. And if we don't get rid of it, it kills us. That's what it said. And the only way for an alcoholic of my type to get rid of any kind of selfishness at all is to become a giver instead of a taker. And that ain't an easy thing. My new days in Alcoholics Anonymous, you proved to me without a doubt, when I'm new in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I was not alcoholic. I didn't think I was anyhow, but you solidified the idea by me just sitting in meetings and listening to you. You'd get up at podiums like this and say things like, I used to drink, now I don't drink anymore, and everything is just wonderful. Guess I'm not alcoholic then. I'm not drinking either, and I'm crazy. If I was alcoholic, all I'd have to do is not drink, for Christ's sake. I'd be okay. But there's something far more wrong with me than that. They talked about getting into action. I thought running around like a chicken with your head cut off was action. See, in my neighborhood, the faster you move, the smaller target you make. And I brought that into A with me, baby. Just, there he goes again. Back there at Inventory Point. I ain't alcoholic. How can I be alcoholic, for Christ's sake? These people who are alcoholics who come in there every Sunday, they say they're alcoholics. Okay, I don't doubt that. They look like alcoholics. They act like alcoholics. And some of them even smell like alcoholics. Right? So they're alcoholics. They're the only alcoholics I know. They say that they quit drinking and they got into action and their life was wonderful. I'm as physically sober as they are. And I'm busy, now maybe all in my head, but as busy. And I'm crazy. I got a piece of paper from the leading psychiatrist in the state of California that says I'm clinically insane. How's that? You're listening. What's it make you? That's what drove in here. Now, I got up one Sunday morning a long time. I don't know which Sunday morning it was. I didn't know it was going to be necessary for me to remember it. But I do know it's the day I'd lived my entire lifetime for. I do know that everything I'd ever done in my life, every rotten, filthy, corrupt thing I'd ever done in my life had driven me right up to the very gates of hell. See, I didn't even know I was in hell. I didn't know that day that I was going to go sit in this room and somebody was going to put the key into that gate and open it up and let me out of there. And if I'd have known that, when I woke up that morning, you would have another talker here this evening. Because I wouldn't have went to an AA meeting. I'd have went over and talked to my therapist, or my psychiatrist, or my counselor, or my parole officer, or maybe the guys on the yard. See, I wasn't conditioned to go to Alcoholics for answers. I was conditioned to go to them, and I never got them. I just went there. Every time I went to them, they told me the same thing. Johnny, if you didn't drink these things and swallow these things and smoke these things and shoot these things, you'd be okay. You know what them people ever took into consideration? That every time they told me that, I was as physically sober as I am right now. How many times I wanted to scream out at them, "Good God, doctor, don't you understand?" Because they don't. See, if you're not an alcoholic, you'll never understand why I drink. But if you're not an alcoholic, I'll never understand why you don't. Very simple. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous works, is because one alcoholic talks to another alcoholic. Like Sandy said last night. Get them to do things that have totally irrelevant to what we're doing here. Makes no sense whatsoever. I went in and sat down in that meeting that day. Little guy that I knew, did 23 flat years in the penitentiary, stood at a podium of Alcoholics Anonymous, very much like this, and told me something I've never forgotten. Makes more sense to me today than anything that I know. It makes more sense to me tomorrow than anything I'll ever learn. He looked down where I was sitting and he said this. He said, "You don't have to live like this no more if you don't want to." He says, "You don't have to do it like this no more." Nobody had ever told me that. They'd been telling me all my life, don't drink, swallow, smoke, and shoot, but they never told me how to live without doing it. After the meeting, I went up to him. I said, "How do you learn how to live?" He looked at me and smiled, and he said, "Johnny, there's a book called Alcoholics Anonymous in the library. If you go home and get it, I'll go home and pray that you find some part of you in it." I guess he's prayed real hard, that little fella, because I've been a student of that book from that day to this day. And the only thing I've ever found in that book is me. I haven't looked for anything else. See, I'm not looking for a way to sober up the world. I'm not looking for a way to cure all of society's ills. I'm not looking for anything, if you want to know the truth. I found everything I've ever wanted. I know exactly where everything is that I'll ever need in my life. It's right here. And you know the strange phenomenon in my life is? that the closer I adhere to the principles that are written in that book, and the more willing I become to share that knowledge in this fellowship, the more peaceful and the more comfortable and the more joyous I live with me and the loving God that made me. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. Oh, I had a long period of construction here because I didn't know anything. But the greatest single event in my life that ever happened to me in my life happened to me in a penitentiary. Coming to Alcoholics Anonymous is not the greatest single event that ever happened to me in my life. I'm sorry, I was physically sober when I got here as I am tonight. My children being born and my grandchildren being born and the good life that's mine and the lovely woman that I'm married to, who I love and adore, is not the most important thing that's ever happened to me in my life. The greatest event that ever happened to me in my life happened to me sitting in a room with a man doing what our program of recovery says is the fifth step. I heard myself say to that man that I was an alcoholic. And from way down deep inside of me, there came a freedom that I carry with me to this very instant. As I stand here before you tonight, I know exactly what's wrong with me. Exactly. I'm an alcoholic, and I suffer from a disease called alcoholism. I am not an alcoholic and anything. When I was an alcoholic and something or other, I couldn't have your program. And the reason I couldn't have it is I separated me from you. I'm not like you. I'm better than you. I'm smarter than you. I'm hipper than you. I'm slicker than you. But I'm not like you. When I became just like you, alcoholic, it became necessary for me to practice the only program of recovery for alcoholics of my type in 7,000 years of recorded history. This is the only thing that's ever worked for people like me. That's why I'm here. Because I know what's wrong with me. I never knew. I never knew up until that moment what was wrong with me. And from that moment to this, I've known every day of my life exactly what's wrong with me and exactly where to go to have something done about it. I know exactly where it is. It's right here with you. This is the only therapy that's been introduced in my life in the last 39 years of my life. I got a piece of paper from that psychiatrist that says I'm never supposed to live outside of an institution without some type of medication in my system because of my violent nature. Yet I've lived outside of that institution for over 37 years without anything in my system stronger than an aspirin. So don't tell me this program doesn't work. Don't tell me this thing doesn't work for any type of emotional disorder you want to handle. Because I came here with the whole enchilada wrapped around me. You know, I walked out of it. I came out of that penitentiary on the 4th day of June, 1961, armed with only one thing. To the best of my ability, the 19 months I was in that institution, I had completed the first 9 steps of our program of recovery. To the best of my ability. While confined in that institution, I did the best I could do there. I walked out into a world I didn't know anything about, a world I had never lived in since I was 7 years old without some type of a chemical edge in my life. Didn't know anything about it. I never had a job. I never had a Social Security card. I never had a driver's license. I never had any of those things. The only thing that I was armed with was a dream that maybe you would let me come and sit with you. That's all. I never dreamed in my wildest imagination you would ever ask me to do anything here. Because I didn't think you'd let things like me sit next to you. Because I knew what I had done. I had never been able to hide me from me. I knew what kind of a scumbag I was. And I knew there was a long road there. I went home to see my mother. My mother fell off the steps blind drunk. I picked her up and put her on her couch and said, "Mom, I'm going to an AA meeting." She said, "Fine, I think you should." I'd like to tell you that my mother got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's not true. My mother never got sober. Oh, she got in a state of undrunkenness from time to time. And while in that state of undrunkenness, she showed up at AA meetings. But in being undrunk and being sober are two entirely different things. But you see, my mother couldn't stay sober. I sit and watch that dance of death for 30 years while my mother drank herself to death. She finally made it 4 years ago. She drank herself to death. You want to feel how much power you got? You really want to know how close you are and how much your prayers are answered? Watch somebody that you love beyond all things drink themselves to death while you sit smack dab in the middle of this magnificent program of recovery called Alcoholics Anonymous, powerless to do anything about it whatsoever. Powerless. I know the meaning of no human power. Because if anybody in the world I wanted to get sober is my little mother. I love my mother. I was the last thing in this world my mother ever saw. I sit at the bedside by my mother and watch her take her last breath. There was nothing at all between my mother and I but the love I had for her. No resentments, no if-onlys in there, none of that victimization nonsense that's killing people all over the world. None of that stuff. If a moment before my mother died, if you'd look into my mother's eyes and say, aren't you proud of your son, Johnnie? Man, he came out of them streets, out of them gangs, out of them penitentiaries, joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's out there, he's living a good, normal, sober life. He does all the things all them citizens do. Aren't you proud? You know what my mother would have told you? My mother would have said to you, my son's not alcoholic. His life got a lot better when he quit running around with them Mexicans. Now, if you would listen to some of the psychobabble that goes on in some of these gatherings they call AA, one of these geniuses would probably tell you, I guess your mama was in a state of denial. A denial is a river in Egypt. A denial is a lie. It's just a flat lie. If you claim to be in a denial, you're a liar. Period. You know why I know that? Because every time I got arrested, I denied that I did it. Knowing full well that I did it. My book talks about a delusion. A delusion. That's not a denial. That's a reality to an alcoholic. The delusion that we're like other people or pleasantly maybe has to be smacked. That's a delusion. I'm not denying I'm not like other people. That's a delusion. Because my mother died in a delusion, thinking that she was like other people, that she could have a drink from time to time, that she didn't need this simple little program called Alcoholics Anonymous, and she was not alcoholic, and neither was anybody around her. I went to a meeting one night. A skinny-legged guy by the name of Norm Alpy, who's dead now, walked up to me and said, I'm going to be your sponsor. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, what is it? He said, well, I'm going to help you get it done. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, why do you ask me? I said, you just said you were going to be my sponsor. He says, if I can't run my life, Johnnie, what makes you think I can run yours? I said, then what am I supposed to do? He says, you do what I do. I said, just what is it you do? He says, if you do what I do, then you'll know what I do, for Christ's sake. Cruel man. You know what he said to me? He said, go to work. I said, what? He said, work. W-O-R-K. Work. You're a bum. I said, I'm not a bum, Norm. He says, what are you? I said, I'm an AA member. He says, you're an AA bum. Bums don't work. Get a job. He says, you got to get off of welfare. I said, don't you ever say that to me ever again, Norm. I ain't never been on welfare. He said, what do you call living in penitentiary? Self-supporting through your own contribution? That guy made Clancy look like a fairy godmother, for Christ's sake. You know, I went to work. Somebody stole my first paycheck. You want to hear somebody scream? Listen to a thief when they get stolen from. Well, if I'd have caught that guy, you'd have another talker here tonight, I'll tell you that. I ranted and raved and hollered and jumped, and the mother of my children said to me, are you all through? And I said, yeah. She said, now you know how it feels. I want a little sympathy, for Christ's sake. But I went back to work that day. I've been drawing a paycheck ever since. And I haven't had to do without anything in over 37 years. I had to have a guy take me down, ask me a dumb question when I went to get a job. He said, "What's your Social Security card number?" And I didn't even know what that was. See, if you're a big-time gangster like me, you don't need a Social Security card. You don't need a driver's license. You don't need nothing. I had to get a social. He says, "You don't have a Social Security card, son?" And I said, "No." He said, "Where have you been all these years?" I said, "I don't think you'd understand if I told you." Took me down, got me a Social Security card, put me to work, so I couldn't go tell my sponsor, "Norm, they ain't hired next convicts, Norm. Can I get back? Can I go down and get on one of them programs, Norm?" Put me to work. Couldn't snivel. You know, Norm wouldn't even let me drive a car. I didn't have a driver's license. He said that citizens like him had a right to be protected from jerks like me. Made me ride my little girl's pink bicycle to meetings. Right through my old neighborhood. Got a big back wheel, little bitty wheel, little white basket with flowers on it. Had a little bell, you could ring it. And I'm driving by my old partners. They're leaning against their big irons in their custom-made suits, pockets and money hanging out of there. They're fancy women. Here I am riding this little bicycle right by, and they're going, "Wow, that AA really works, don't it, John?" Called him up. I said, "Norm." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Norm, I got money. I'm going to buy a car." He said, "You got a driver's license?" I said, "Well, I got a temporary license. You know, the parole officer said I had to have a temporary license to go to work. If I didn't go to work, I had to go back to jail." Now, see how cruel that was? My parole officer. If I didn't get a job, I was going to have to go back to the penitentiary. See how they used to treat us? I mean, that's before all the bleeding hearts showed up somewhere, for Christ's sake. So I had to get a temporary permit so I could go to work, so I get a job so I wouldn't have to go back to the penitentiary. So now, I got a temporary permit. So I want to buy a car. And I called old Norm up. And I said to him, "I got money, Norm, and a temporary permit. I'm going to buy a car." He says, "You have insurance?" I just hung up. Finally, the day comes. You know, if you persist in this illusion, you'll get them sooner or later. The day came. Got the money, got the driver's license, got the money for the insurance. I don't even call Norm up. I just go buy a car. And I drove that old car up to Norm's house and honked the horn. Honk, honk. Old Norm came out from behind the garage. He had one of them tank top things on and a pair of jeans. He looked at me and he looked at that car. He looked at that car and he looked at me. And Norm knew that car was legal. He walked up to me and he put his arms around me and he hugged me and he said, "Johnny, I think maybe you're starting to get the idea that there ain't a damn thing special about you just because you got sober. That you have to live just like all the rest of the people in the world have always lived, only you have to live a little better. Maybe you're starting to get the idea that there ain't a damn thing special about you just because you got sober." Boy, how right he was. How right he was. Because that old man that I used to run around with, his name was Chuck. He was the only father I've ever known. I used to ride around with him all the time in cars when I was new and sit there and listen to him and watch him. And I'd always try to say things to make him understand that I was paying attention, or to get his attention, or maybe think that I'd have done anything for his approval. And every time I'd say anything, I said it wrong. I'd say anything, "Well, Pop, blah, 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 blah." He said, "That's not the way I said it." So I quit saying anything. I used to snatch things off the literature table. One night I got this pamphlet. I knew he couldn't argue with it. We're a couple 100 miles up the coast, and we're driving home. He's driving, and I'm riding. I said, "I'd like to read this to you, Pop." He said, "What is it?" And I said, "It's this little thing I got off the literature table." He said, "Well, go ahead, son. What is it?" I said, "Why we were chosen." He said, "Hold it. We're not chosen." I said, "It says right here we're chosen." He said, "I don't give a damn what that says. Throw it out the window." He said, we're not chosen. I said, what? He said, no. He said, Johnny, we're all God's kids. If I am, you are, and if you are, I am. He said, remember this. He makes the rain to fall on the just as well as the unjust. Then I said to him, how come I'm sober then? He always got one of them little smart asses hanging around somewhere. How come I'm sober if I'm not special? He said, well, that's very simple. He says, you've come to understand you're one of God's kids, and you act like it. And I said to him, well, what do God's kids act like? I mean, there ain't no school. I never saw any school. God's kids. Come down here, we'll teach you how to be God's kid. But that's what Sandy was doing last night. That's what sponsors do. Papa told me that God's kids help God's kids get things done that need to be done. And they do it for free, and they do it for fun. He even taught me how to answer a phone. He said, you don't even know how to answer a phone. I said, yes, you do. You pick up the phone and say hello. He said, no. You say if the date's open, it's yours. Do you realize how simple my life is? You cannot believe how simple my life is. Do you know that takes care of Thanksgiving, Christmas, the 4th of July, birthdays, anniversaries, everything? That takes care of the whole ballgame. Because that is what you have created my life. See, I belong to you. Everything else is just on loan to me. I owe Alcoholics Anonymous a great, great debt. See, Alcoholics Anonymous never restored me to anything. Alcoholics Anonymous molded me. Everything you see, everything I am, everything I will hope to ever be is the byproduct of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous working in my life. And yet they haven't made a complete, perfect human being here. We all have feet of clay. The best you ever get around here is basic human being. You know, I've had a lot of ups and downs since I've been sober. You know, I can't tell you every meal I've eaten has been a banquet, and every day I've lived out on the sunny side of the street. I know a lot of things. I've been through business failures. I've been through divorces. My wife, the mother of my children, committed suicide right before my 5th birthday. I'm strapping them 2 little girls. I don't know how to raise 2 little girls, for Christ's sake. I treated them like drunks. They turned out fine. One of them was a registered nurse, and the other was got a big job at Boeing. She calls me up and tells me she's a big shot. Tells me I'm a square. Daddy, you're a lame, she said. And I said, thank God, Jackie, I made it. I damn near died out there being hip. And even more important than that, I damn near died here being hip. Thank God for my sponsor. I went to a meeting with him one night. I don't know, in our part of the world they have coffee breaks. And coffee break, you wander around. I wander around. I'm back there by the literature table. I always pick up stuff on the literature table and get in trouble for it. And I standing there, a guy tapped me on the shoulder. And he said, Johnny? And I said, yeah. And he said, man, he said, I heard you talk the other night. Do you know you're a miracle? I said, what? He said, you're a miracle, man. He said, man, you know, you came out and you did all, man, I heard you, you're a miracle. I just kind of just floated back to my seat, sat down there and stared at old Norm and looked out the window for my star. I don't know what Norm said that night, but on the way home from there, he said to me, jackass, which was his pet name for me. He said, you've been smoking that stuff again? I said, Norm, I don't think you're going to understand this, but I'm a miracle. He didn't understand it. Matter of fact, he slammed on the brakes, damn near run into the divider, and screamed at me, you're what? I said, I'm a miracle, Norm. He said, where do you get this nonsense, John? I said, the guy just told me that. He said, jackass, you're not a miracle. Alcoholics Anonymous is a miracle, and you're just a small part of it. Now, I don't know what that does for all the miracles in Connecticut. But I can tell you what it's done for me. It's kept me small enough to stay here. Could you possibly imagine what an egotist like me would do if I believed I was a miracle? You can let your imagination soar. I'd probably be hiring some Greyhound buses to take us all to Waco tonight to do it right this time. I have that type of ego. I know that. That's why I have to go to 4 or 5 meetings a week. That's why I have to have a sponsor that's stronger than my head, who's active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't run my own life. I'm chaos, running wild out there somewhere. Every time I've ever been in any trouble since I've been sober, and I've been never in danger of taking a drink, I don't think, but just goofy. When I'm out there somewhere, I get an idea in my head. God, if I only had that, my life would be better. And boy, here I go again. And then when I get that, I can't get rid of it. Isn't that silly? Isn't that a stupid thing to think that a guy like me who knows he can't run his own life, every once in a while will get around and think that he knows what will make it better? Now that's insanity. Pure and simple. I know what's going to make my life better. No, I don't. I haven't got a clue what will make my life better. I only know that if I come and sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't make any major decisions without consulting somebody about it around here, and I do whatever I'm asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, my life gets better. It just gets better. Problems seem to be unsurmountable. Just vaporized. They're gone. I don't even know what problem I had yesterday. I know it was heavy. It's a crazy kind of thing. Just come and sit in meetings. My wife committed suicide. I came and sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. My kids got on drugs. My youngest daughter went crazy her senior year in high school. I went and sit in meetings. I didn't cut down my meetings. I jacked them up there a little bit. When my business failed, I didn't say, oh. I went and sit in meetings. I took care of my commitments. I did what I was supposed to do. I called my sponsor. I sponsored people. I did what I was supposed to do around here. Now I sit around and tell you I got another business. Pays all my bills. It's amazing to me. I got another wife. A woman I adore. I love her. I'm crazy about that person. It's my soulmate, I guess you could call it, what she says. She may listen to the tape. I can't deny that, for Christ's sake. That daughter of mine, that lovely daughter of mine, I adore. She's 3 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I ain't had nothing to do with that. She's got the cutest little 8-year-old boy, my grandson, that I absolutely adore. Every time he sees my wife Karen, he says, "Where's my grandpa at?" He wants me to be around him. He comes over to my house, tears things up. Blames it on the puppy. We don't even have a puppy. And that's all right with me. You know what's the great thing about grandchildren? You know why grandparents and grandchildren get along so well together? They both have a common enemy. I really have a great life, folks. I tell you, I really do. I really have a tremendous life. I don't know anybody in the world who lives any better than I do. I really don't. I know there's a lot of people who have more things than I do, but I don't know anybody who lives any better than I do. You know what it's like to live all day long in absolute and total peace? I do. I know what it's like to live in a peaceful world most of the time. I know what it's like to have a God of my very own. I know what it's like to be absolutely and totally current in every affair of my life as I am right this moment. If I drop dead right this very moment, I am absolutely and totally current with everybody and everything in my life. It's amazing to me. That's what brings about peace, because I haven't got any unsettled business. All my business is taken care of. Any amends that I make, I have to make. I've already made them. Any bills I have to pay, I've already paid them. All these things. I'm current with my children. I'm current with my grandchildren. I'm current with my sponsor. I'm current with the people I sponsor. I'm current with my friends. I'm current with my ex-wives, for Christ's sakes. As long as they get their checks at the end of the month, they don't give a shit about how I'm doing. It's an amazing world that I live in. And all I do, this is amazing, all I do is go to meetings. I just go sit in meetings. I call my sponsor. Norm died. Day before my 22nd birthday, Norm just died. Well, he could have waited another day. No, he just died. I flopped around here 22 years sober, almost goofy. Almost goofy. People would say things to me like, you sponsor all these people, Johnny, go talk to some of them. So I'd go talk to them. I'd go talk to a guy of 10, 12 years sober. I'd say to him whatever it was that bothered me, he'd give me an answer. I'd turn around and walk away and say, yeah. That's the way I used to think when I was 12 years sober. Well, we're real slick. One day I found myself down in the office in Los Angeles talking to this guy named Clancy. I didn't go down there for any reason. I just went down there to talk over this hypothetical situation that was going on that I'd already resolved. I just wanted to make sure I'd resolved it right. You know how we are. And so I asked him, I laid this big thing out to him. He gave me the same answer I'd already taken care of. He gave me the same set of actions I'd already taken care of. So I knew I was right. So I got up, shook his hand, thanked him very much for his time, and turned to walk out the door. And something stopped me at the door of his office. Like a cold chill came over me or something. I turned and I walked and turned around, looked at him. I said, you know what, Clancy, I need a sponsor. And he looked at me and he said, I thought he was going to say, what an order, I can't go through with it. You know what I mean? Because look who he's got standing in front of it. You know what I mean? Himself. And I said, what do you want me to do? He said, well, why don't you show up at the Wednesday night meeting and call me every day? Okay? It's 15 years now. I still call him every day. Some guy asked me about that the other day. He said, you still call Clancy every day? And I said, yeah. He said, why? And I said, he hasn't told me not to yet. See, I can't run my own life. I know that. I ran my own life for 27 years. I ran it, and I ended up crawling around a cell in solitary confinement in a maximum security penitentiary, drifting in and out of total insanity. That's what happens when I run my life. I can't run my life. But you see, my ego doesn't demand that I run my life. My ego doesn't demand that I get any credit for being saved, or that I get any credit for being sober and Alcoholics Anonymous, for all the good things that's happened to me. My ego doesn't demand it at all, because I know where the credit goes. It goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and the God I discovered sitting with you. See, everything that ever happens to me in Alcoholics Anonymous has already happened to me. I sat right over there last night and realized why I come to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings all the time. I sit here and heard Sandy talk last night. I sit here tonight and I watched all these people get introduced. I watched them do all this reading and all this other stuff that they did around here. And while I was doing that, I was more interested in them than I was in me. And in those brief moments of my life, I'm probably as close to God as I'm ever going to get. I'm never going to be closer to God than that. My papa told me a long, long time ago, he said, son, nature abhors a vacuum, but God abhors a vacuum even more under heaven and earth. He said to me, if I was to empty myself of self, I would be automatically full of God. See, everything I always look for everywhere, all I had to do was just sit still and get rid of me, and there would be. See, I'm not looking for anything anymore. I found everything I've ever wanted in life. And I found it sitting in meetings with you. God of my understanding, a world that I can live in that I don't belong to but can still live in and exist in all the time. A degree of comfort and peace and happiness beyond my wildest description. Every promise in that book that they read tonight, I've endured since I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And not having anything special, not being any kind of special person in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's available for anybody that wants it. That's all. I was told a long, long time ago, there ain't any good or bad people in this world, just those people who know and those who don't know. That's all. And I didn't know. I didn't know what was wrong with me all of my life. And then I came in here and sit with you. You gave me a book, and I discovered the very nature of my malady. I discovered that there was a solution for my malady, that my selfishness and my self-centered was going to kill me, that I could get busy in this thing, and in my dark past be my greatest asset. With it I could avert misery and death for other people. That I should go out and try to stick my hand out in meetings, and I should try to be a friend among friends. I should be one among many. I should be one of God's kids, trying to help God's kids get things done that need to be done. And do it for free, and do it for fun, and do it in every area of my life, where I work and where I play and what I do. That's the way I act. I try to the best of my ability to act like my life was worth saving in the first place, for Christ's sakes. My sponsor told me that. He says, you ought to at least go look like your life was worth saving when you go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what I've been taught. You see, everything I have in my life, I owe to this program called Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything. Not just something, everything. Everything I may ever hope to get or have in this program of life, I owe to this program. And dear friends, please believe this. It's a long walk from a cell in solitary confinement at a maximum security penitentiary to where I stand right now. But for the grace of God, AA and good friends like David, I could have missed it all. God bless you.